I welcome our witnesses and thank them for their service to our nation. Today we'll hear from the Department of the Army regarding their FY27 budget request. As my colleagues are aware, I am laser focused on bolstering and expanding our industrial base. Last year we worked to fundamentally reform defense acquisition system via the SPEED Act. The reforms enacted in the FY26 NDAA streamlined the process and significantly reduced the time it takes to field new military capabilities. This year, the focus of the NDA will be expanding the industrial base, both organic and defense-wide. Our defense industrial base, long the envy of the world, has atrophied significantly. Our global munition stockpiles are low and we lack the capacity to rapidly restock magazine depth. The industrial base has shrunk, and so has our ability to manufacture for our warfighters at speed and scale. Our government-owned depots, arsenals, ammunition plants, and shipyards are a vital component of our overall capacity to manufacture and sustain critical capabilities. But as bad as the contraction has been in the private sector's manufacturing capability, it's arguably been worse in our organic industrial base. The OIB has suffered from decades of neglect and underinvestment. Recent conflicts have exposed the weaknesses in the OIB, and the weakness in the OIB directly affects our readiness. Mission-capable rates for critical weapons systems have fallen well below acceptable levels. I've been beating the drum for a long time on the decline of our OIB and the defense industrial base as a whole. I'm glad that President Trump shares my concerns and has released a budget request that finally addresses this problem. The President has requested a historic $1.5 trillion budget for our national defense. This budget directly confronts the challenges in our defense industrial base with over $100 billion in investments to revitalize manufacturing, expand domestic and allied critical minerals projects, and secure our supply chains. We need to enact that budget, and we need to rapidly turn that historic investment into capability for our warfighter. That's why it is so critical to understand from the services how they plan to accomplish that goal. Last year, the Secretary of the Army offered the Transformation Initiative, or ATI. The goal was to position the Army for future fights, streamline force structure, and eliminate wasteful spending. Congress shares those goals, but as questions arose, it became clear that the Army hadn't done all of its homework. ATI has since evolved into what is being called the continuous transformation. The name may have changed, but our questions remain. We'd like to see a concrete plan on how the Army intends to modernize, where the investments will be made, what risks to readiness will be absorbed, and what impact it will have on the industrial base. We want to make sure the Army has done a careful analysis of how transformation will affect our capabilities and force structure. We want to understand how the Army intends to sustain the legacy capabilities our service members still need and use. We want to avoid spending this historic influx of money ineffectively and wasting the opportunity to bolster the DIB. I'm confident that by working together we can transform the Army and revitalize our industrial base. With that, I yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I completely agree. Innovating faster at scale is the core of what we're trying to do. The SPEED Act that you led last year and passed puts us in a good position to make progress on that. Acquisition reform is absolutely critical to getting to where we need to be. I also think the Army has been forward-leaning on this, particularly in the last couple of years. Have had the opportunity to go down to Austin a couple times, visit the training and transformation campaign. There was a real commitment in the Army to making those changes. I do want to thank both General George and General Hodney, who really sort of pushed forward that effort in a variety of different ways. They served our country very, very well. There was a lot more work to do, as the chairman pointed out. We are not where we need to be on the defense industrial base or producing what we need to produce. And I look forward to hearing from both of our witnesses today about what can we do to increase that manufacturing, get to the scale that we need. The other point that I always like to make is we are going to need to do it in a cost-effective way. I think it is highly unrealistic to ask for a 50–60% increase in the defense budget when we have our debt to GDP ratio over 100% and we continue to cut taxes and reduce our revenue in 1,000 different ways to the tune of trillions of dollars. that just doesn't add up. And past a certain point, that is a national security threat to this country. Now, the good news, I think, as I've looked at the technology that we have the ability to meet our defense needs in a more cost-effective manner. We have developed a number of new systems. There's a lot of private capital out there investing in cheaper missiles, cheaper drones, cheaper ways to shoot down drones, crucially, secure communication systems. So I really think we need to focus on how can we achieve our national security objectives in a more cost-effective way. And I worry that once again, as we have for the last 25 years, our approach is simply be, well, let's just throw more money at the problem. Let's imagine that we have an infinite amount of resources, and it's just too important to care about how much it costs. Sadly, fiscal restraints are part of life as much as we want to try to wish them away. So I want to hear from our witnesses today about how they're planning on doing all of this, but doing it in a way that we can actually afford. One piece of that, two final issues that I just want to make sure you address. The money that DoD is giving to the Department of Homeland Security, we have not been adequately reimbursed for that. It seems like that money just goes into a black hole. They have their needs, but DoD has its needs. I'd love to find out if they're ever going to pay back for that and if we're going to stop just having DoD subsidize DHS. The last point, the Army is the lead agency on civilian harm. This committee, this Congress a couple years ago passed requirements in terms of funding, and I forget the exact name of it, a civilian harm center to basically take a look and make sure that we are not killing civilians when we shouldn't be. Sorry, we should never be killing civilians, I should say, that we're being careful about how we fight our wars and we live within rules of engagement that make sense. As I understand it, the Department of Defense and Army has completely defunded that. You are in violation of the law right now on civilian harm. I'd like to know either A, what the explanation is for why you think it's okay for you to ignore the law that Congress passes, or B, what you're planning on doing to fix that problem. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank the ranking member. Now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. We have the Honorable Dan Driscoll, Secretary of the Army, and new to us, General Christopher LaNeve is the Acting Chief of Staff of the Army. Welcome. Mr. Driscoll, we'll start with you. You're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members, it is a privilege to address you today. After a year in this position, I am prouder than ever to represent our soldiers and their amazing families. As all of you know, our soldiers are the very best in the world. They're bold, decisive, and they can overcome anything when we properly enable them. That's why I spent over 130 days on the road across 19 countries and 25 states to hear directly from them. I ate with them, put hands on their equipment, and had candid discussions with soldiers of every single rank. What I heard was clear. Our soldiers are ready to innovate and win, but our own bureaucracy and regulations are still holding them back. Getting what soldiers need to win and making the Army budget actually work for them is definitionally a bipartisan topic, and I know all of you agree with that. You've supported our Army for decades, and we wouldn't be here without you. But we know the system that should benefit soldiers remains broken. Quality of life and battlefield advantage aren't always the #1 budget priority. It's a simple fact, and we need your help to continue to change it. We need right to repair language, relief from pre-World War II laws, and significantly more budget flexibility. Thank you so much for last year's progress. But if we're going to win the next fight, we must go even further. Technological change is accelerating, warfare is evolving, and speed is absolutely critical. Your help to either lower barriers to innovation or stick to the decades-long status quo makes all the difference. I invite all of you to come see our transformation firsthand. We are partnering with private industry to adopt the best tech, talent, and tradecraft. We're inviting those partners out to our bases to unlock dormant resources and offset federal budget delays. We're blazing a trail for our nation on nuclear energy, counter-drone capabilities, and military AI. Despite red tape, we're delivering better dining, barracks, Wi-Fi, and 3D printed barracks. Even though it can feel like the deck is stacked against us, the United States Army is a beacon of transformation. For instance, as we speak, we are hosting the largest hackathon ever in human history to retroactively jailbreak our siloed equipment. It's named Operation Jailbreak. Last month in Europe, Soldiers showed me how our software systems are compartmentalized, isolated, and ineffective against modern threats. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Delta Common Operating System, their modular open architecture command and control system, is absolutely incredible. It fully integrates every drone, every sensor, and every single shooting platform into just one single network. Ours does not. Unfortunately, for decades, our budget process incentivized companies to protect their intellectual property at all costs, creating walled gardens in our command and control architecture. This has been the status quo for far too long. It is no longer acceptable, and industry is helping us solve it right now. I contacted 9 of our defense primes and other large partners who immediately agreed to send thousands of pieces of equipment, engineers, and scientists to Fort Carson. Together, we will force our way through the firewalls, link every system, and achieve true right to integrate. And this is just our first sprint on it. We will do it again and again and again until we get it exactly right. I want to be clear, this is a perfect example of our Army's potential for speed and innovation. No one else has the talent, the drive, and the obsessive work ethic like our soldiers to pull this off. Operation Jailbreak is the first of many sprints to bypass red tape and bureaucracy. What we're doing in Colorado should be the standard operating procedure going forward. It's the iterative process that make America's tech sector the very best in the world. But you would be amazed at the regulatory walls that stood in our way. And we've expended a sinful amount of energy just to do the right thing. Imagine what we could do if you continue to help us slash those restrictions. We can do more if you help us balance oversight with speed. We can maximize our budget if you help us partner with America's entrepreneurs. We can move faster if you help us shed obsolete equipment and invest in the future. And with your help, we can ensure the Army remains the dominant land fighting force for the next 250 years. Thank you so much for having us, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. You're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee today. The credibility of our Army is defined by what it is prepared to do, not what it intends to do. So every decision I make enables our soldiers to be more lethal and ready to fight and win and serve as the backbone of the joint force. In the Indo-Pacific, we're building a force postured to deter threats to U.S. national interest and designed to extend the operational reach and endurance of the joint force. Right now, 87,000 soldiers are campaigning throughout the region. Our Typhoon missile systems are forward deployed to the Philippines and Japan. We've positioned LTAMs in Guam and the IPIC unit in Korea, extending next-generation air and missile defense against current threats in the region. The 1st and 3rd multi-domain task forces are now operational in the region, and this fall, the 4th multi-domain task force headquarters will stand up at Fort Carson. Each MDTF brings together long-range fires, intelligence, electronic warfare, space, and cyber, all integrated into a single theater-level capability designed to support Joint Force commanders across vast distances of the Pacific. Every one of these capabilities exists because of the investments this committee supported. In the Middle East, our Army forces continue to defend U.S. personnel and partners while sustaining layered air and missile defense, long-range strike capabilities, and operational logistics across CENTCOM. And at home, we're preparing the force for future conflict at our combat training centers. It's where we train our soldiers to fight against an adversary in the mud, to solve complex problems, and to test our latest systems. But we cannot field our modern kit while sustaining aging systems that consume time, money, and manpower. Divesting legacy platforms reduces the maintenance demand that falls hardest on our junior soldiers and frees resources to advance next-generation systems. That's why we restructured how we acquire, design, sustain, and field equipment with a decisive focus on speed, the right to repair, and systems modularity. That thinking is already reflected in some of the next-generation platforms we're going after, like the XM-30 infantry fighting vehicle, the M1E3 Abrams, and the MV-75 Cheyenne, which provides unprecedented speed, range, and flexibility. Each of these systems are designed so that the next operational upgrade requires integration, not a completely new start. But none of this matters if we can't produce and sustain at scale. That's why we continue to modernize the OIB through advanced manufacturing, depot modernization, and expanded partnerships with industry, including enhanced use leases that accelerate infrastructure development and production capability. And while industrial capacity is important, the strength of our Army is only as strong as our ability to retain experienced soldiers, and whether the force we're building reflects the standards we claim to uphold. That standard includes $4 billion in infrastructure investments throughout 2026. We're rolling out campus-style dining facilities. We're scaling our holistic health and fitness across the entire force. And soldiers see the difference, and so do American citizens. Our recruiting numbers are soaring, and we're on track to achieve this year's target way ahead of schedule. Because in the end, soldiers are the reason your Army can do what it does. Your Army delivers intelligence and fires that enable maneuver. We sustain operations, we protect the force, and we provide the command and control architecture that allows the joint force and America's allies to operate together. Every component of the joint fight depends on our Army's ability to do all those things simultaneously and exceptionally well. And we will not fail our country. This will defend. And thank you all for your continued support as we sustain the best Army the world has ever seen.
Thank you, General. I recognize myself now for questions. General, I read an ABC News article recently about you having to scramble to slash some training costs and make some other adjustments to deal with a $4 to $6 billion shortfall. Can you tell me why that shortfall occurred and how it's impacting you? Turn your microphone on, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Sir, first off, we haven't canceled anything. The report is false. It's based off of prudent planning that we always do, normally around this time of the year, to take a look at what levers that we can pull as we near the end of the FY. We do have a shortfall right now, and you talked about it. Well, Ranking Member Smith talked about it in the opening statement about some of the reimbursements that were due back in.
Why don't you go ahead and address his question right now? How are you going to be backfilled by DHS with that money?
We believe we will, sir.
Do you know what the time frame is?
Chairman, we've spoken with Secretary Mullen. We're working hand in hand with his team. We told your colleagues in the Senate a couple of days ago, we're optimistic within a week or two there should be meaningful movement on that. We are equally aligned that we want that those backfilled payments, and so we will stay in touch with your office if that does not occur.
Yeah, please do. We will help you with that. You're supposed to be backfilled, and as I understand, the money is now available. But anyway, Secretary, you made reference to this in your opening statement. I want you to tell me more about this right to integrate. How's it working, and what's the goal? Exactly what is the right to integrate?
Yes, sir. So, Chairman, it is basically this idea that every single system that creates a piece of data should be able to share that data anywhere we, the United States Army, need it to go, and then that system can receive data. Over the last 30 and 40 years, the vast majority of our systems have been designed for closed purposes. Historically, that did add a degree of security, but practically speaking, what that does today is it prevents you from being able to use things like agentic AI solutions. And when you're thinking of drone swarms and the threats to react, a human being cannot do that alone. And so by breaking open these systems and allowing them to communicate with each other, that will push us forward massively to be able to transform our Army.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be essential for us to be able to use AI to its maximum potential. You also mentioned when you talked about it, us helping you break down some walls. Are there some statutory changes that you need us to make to facilitate that?
Chairman, I think it's more on the right to repair side. The right to integrate side is we just have to do a better job as an Army of requiring it. And I just want to give a very sincere, positive statement about the large defense primes who I'm on record bashing quite often. They've been incredible in helping us with this process. A lot of the largest American defense companies have really stepped up in the last 2 weeks. And currently, as we sit here right now, there are literally hundreds of developers and programmers working on this task on all of our behalf and our soldiers' behalf.
Great news. I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time to the gentlewoman from Hawaii, Mr. Kuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member. Secretary Driscoll, the reason I'm actually going first to ask questions is because I'm going to be jumping on a plane to go to my son's graduation tomorrow. It's a big moment. And I
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a long 18 years. I share this with you, though, because it's an emotional time for a lot of families. It's a time when we watch our kids go away to the mainland. Many of them don't come back. See, from a young age, we understand that land is not just real estate. It's a promise of home. And we have seen so much of our land stolen, taken away, bought off. Whether it's the federal government or wealthy investors, we don't want to lose even an inch, even an inch. So I need you to understand the passion with which I have questioned many that came before you, because for us it is deeply personal. And when you talk about condemnation, when the only language that we've seen put before the committee has been talks of being able to acquire this land through eminent domain, it breaks our heart, it angers us, because we've already had too much stolen, and you know for a fact the land we are talking about at Pohakuloa training area is already stolen land, and to steal it again would be absolutely it would be absolutely wrong to do this. And so I ask you as a mother today, looking back at the fact that more Native Hawaiians live outside of Hawaii than in Hawaii, because we don't have land to spare, will you commit to me that we can take any language of condemnation, that we can rip it up, we can take condemnation completely off the table, and we can have a discussion about a real lease negotiation? Let's talk 25 years. Let's talk about real cash, not $1 for 65 years like it's been. Can we talk about taking condemnation off, taking that gun away from the head of the state and from all Native Hawaiians right now who feel that pain, and simply talk about a lease renegotiation, terms and conditions, community benefits, working on the EIS? Can we do that, Secretary?
Congresswoman, I don't say this next statement lightly. The people of Hawaii have been absolutely incredible to our soldiers and their families for many years. When I have gotten a chance to go visit, it is one of our most requested duty stations, and it is because the community has adopted our soldiers into their lives, and I sincerely want to say thank you for that. To your specific question, my understanding has been since the day I stepped foot on that ground and started interacting with the state government, this is an issue that is coming up quickly. This training land is incredibly important.
Mr. Secretary, I need to interject because I don't have much time. You have 39 months. You have time. You have time to do this the right way. You have time to make sure that for this land that we are talking about, we can leave it to the next generation of Hawaiians to determine the sovereignty and autonomy of this land. Condemnation would take that away from them. Committing now that you will take that condemnation off the table, again, all language that has been submitted to committees, been in discussion with the governor, take away condemnation and talk about year leases. Have you ever talked about anything other than condemnation? Have we talked about a 25-year lease renegotiation and terms and conditions?
Congresswoman, my understanding from interacting quite often with the local government is it is a practical impracticality that the state government can possibly even do a lease between now and 2020.
So has our state government then, the governor's office, who I assume you have been negotiating with Governor Green and his team, is that correct?
We've
when you say
spoken
state
with
and
a
local
number of
government?
local participants.
Okay, so have they never put on the table simply a lease extension, a new lease? Have they been okay with condemnation? Because here's the thing about condemnation, it's a unilateral action. And if we're committing to real negotiations, because as you have said yourself, Hawaii has been a gracious host. This is not how you treat people who have given you and shown you aloha. Has it ever been tossed on the table that we should have a lease negotiation versus condemnation?
Congresswoman, the governor, his team, all of the local advocates have fought incredibly tirelessly and proposed all sorts of solutions.
Have solutions been anything other than condemnation?
They have proposed a number of solutions. My responsibility as Secretary of the Army is care about our soldiers, their lethality.
We all care about our soldiers and want the best. Can you tell me that right now we can take condemnation off the table and commit to a lease renegotiation? Every path is hard. It's about doing it the right way. That's what I'm looking for.
Congresswoman, we have to leave all options
Gentlelady's
on the
time's
table.
expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Joe Wilson.
Indeed. Please, it's South Carolina, like with the Secretary, North Carolina. So please don't get them confused. With that in mind, thank you, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your efforts at bipartisanship. And it's exciting to see this hearing today. And as a 31-year veteran of the Army Guard myself, with 4 sons who have served in Iraq, Egypt, or Afghanistan, I have never been more proud of America's military, assisting Syria as the dictator Assad fled to Moscow, assisting and arresting the dictator of Maduro of Venezuela, eliminating the dictator Khomeini of Tehran, while rescuing our pilot in Iran, leaving no one behind. Hope for freedom is provided for the people of Syria and Venezuela and Iran. Dictators are on the run around the world, which historically I don't think that many have disappeared in a year and a half ever, but thank you for all of you for your success. I want to thank the witnesses for your service, dedicated service, and appearing today as the Army confronts growing threats from the Chinese Communist Party, war criminal Putin, Iran, North Korea, and other adversaries. Land power remains an essential in deterring aggression, reassuring allies, and defeating threats across multiple theaters. We're now engaged in a multi-domain competition spanning industrial capacity, hypersonic missiles, cyber capabilities, drones, long-range fires, and contested logistics. As courageous Ukrainians defeat war criminal Putin, just as we have learned missile defense from Israel, we can now learn about drone and robotics from the success of stopping war criminal Putin by the very talented people of Ukraine. With that in mind, we must ensure that America's military remains modernized and strong, truly for peace through strength. And Mr. Secretary, to address the slow acquisition timelines for capabilities soldiers need now, whether that is long-range precision fires, the mobile tactical cannon, counter-UAS, or contested sustainment, what is the Army doing to facilitate acceleration of fielding timelines while ensuring domestic suppliers consistent with President Trump's American First industrial base strategy prior to rise?
Congressman, I couldn't agree more, and I just want to go on record stating how proud we are of our soldiers and everything they've done in the last year under President Trump and Secretary of War Hegseth's leadership. The United States Army has been able to move out and do things we haven't done in decades to cut down the bureaucratic timeline to get our soldiers what they need. So specifically, what we've done in the last year is we cut down our PEOs, which were a number of siloed acquisition professionals with approximately 15 steps along each process. Each of those steps could reset a purchase back to the beginning, and this led to outcomes where it could take 2 to 4 years to buy things we knew we wanted and needed. We have consolidated down to new PAEs, and as an example of the success, on day 5 of Operation Epic Fury, we knew we needed to surge more counter-drone solutions into theater. By day 10, we had purchased 23,000, and by day 20, they were starting to flow into theater, with Ranger Regiment 82nd helping to train our soldiers forward. And that is all because of the changes that we made to our acquisition.
Well, again, the opportunities we have of learning from our allies. I hope there was an article yesterday in the Washington Times front page about the success of Ukrainian drones and robotics to defeat war criminal Putin and the oppressed people of Russia. With that in mind, too, I'm really grateful. I represent Fort Jackson, the initial Army training facility. And General and Secretary, it's always exciting to be at the airport in Columbia and see these young people come in with a brown envelope to be greeted by the drill sergeant. And so, I look at it, look at the opportunities and fulfilling lives these young people are going to have. With that in mind, there's a program there for the Future Soldier Prep Course. And I've been really impressed with it. And Mr. Secretary, as we approach issues, what is the future for that course?
Congressman, I actually did basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and it was an honor to go back. And I would challenge any American that isn't feeling good about your country, go watch a graduation at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, as these previously civilians 9 weeks before come out as soldiers, and so many families are crying. And one of the things about the Future Soldier Prep Course that makes it so special is when you get there, there's a why wall. And so these are for civilians who just can't quite make the cut for whatever the reason is. And so when they get to the course, they write their why of being there. And what we have found is these soldiers who go through between 2 and 10 weeks of additional training, either on academics or fitness or diet, they come out and have the exact same.
Gentleman's time's expired.
You're ahead of the curve. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Driscoll, on May 1st, 4,000 Army soldiers of the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team attended a color casing ceremony, a send-off ahead of deployment to Eastern Europe that the Army had announced last March. At the ceremony, Major General Tom Felty, who's the head of the 1st Cavalry Division, gave some very stirring remarks where he said, quote, "Make no mistake, our adversaries are paying attention. When an armored brigade combat team deploys forward, it sends a clear and unmistakable signal. The ABCT is the embodiment of American ground combat power." Given the fact that the administration just canceled this deployment a couple days ago, we had people actually already over there right now. I guess the question sort of begs itself, which is the opposite true? If our adversaries are paying attention, is the cancellation of a deployment of a brigade combat team sending, again, the opposite signal in terms of our commitment to our allies in Eastern Europe?
Sir, thank you for the question. The COCOM commander, General Grinkovich, received the instructions on the force reduction. I've worked with him in close consultation on what that force unit would be, and it made the most sense for that brigade to not do its deployment in theater. We continue to work closely with General Grinkovich and his team on ensuring that he has the right forces from us, the Title 10 headquarters here, that mans, trains, equips, and gets the units ready for their deployments. So we worked with him on what would be the unit that would not execute the mission.
Well, again, I think General Felty is right that our adversaries are paying attention, and that I appreciate the answer, but frankly, I don't think that really rises to the moment in terms of just, again, the situation that exists in Europe. And frankly, it's not just our adversaries that are paying attention, it's our allies. Poland, which is apparently where the deployment was at least going to begin and originate, is an ally that's spending 4.8% of GDP in terms of their defense budgets, and all the other Baltic countries are up in that range as well. And given the fact that the administration also canceled or is pulling back 5,000 troops out of Germany, I'm sorry, I just think this is a horrible message that, again, our adversaries and allies are paying attention to. Mr. Secretary, Chairman Rogers talked about the fact that this committee is laser focused on the industrial base, which, again, I think there's bipartisan lockstep unity on that question. Your budget cuts aviation, fixed wing aviation, rotary wing aviation to historic levels. A couple days ago, Secretary Hegseth appeared before the House Armed Services Committee. My colleague from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, raised the point about, you are decimating the industrial base with that radical reduction in investment, which, by the way, the Army National Guard was requesting 24 Blackhawks in their 2027 statement that's there. Secretary Hegseth actually said he agreed that we need to take another look at that, quote unquote, during the hearing. And I just would ask you whether you agree with Secretary Hegseth that the impact in terms of the industrial base requires a second look.
Congressman, from your reference to his remarks, I don't know all the depth of what was implied, but I absolutely agree that we will take a hard look with the Office of Secretary of War and make sure that we are synced with their strategy and their plans as they look across the joint force and balance their requirements and needs of the military as a whole.
The critical part of the industrial base, which this committee is going to be very attentive to as we get closer to markup. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for also your focus on the issue of production. It is the main issue that we're all trying to address. In Ohio, we have the Joint Systems Manufacturing Center, also known as the Lima Tank Plant, and it is one of those facilities that is a great illustration of the struggles or the issue that we face in trying to increase production. We just had an industry panel, and they identified one of the greatest difficulties in trying to increase production as the inconsistent demand signals that come from the Pentagon, because it both affects the issue of costs and also production schedules and therefore capacity. It affects their ability to go and attract capital out in the markets. It affects their ability to have healthy supply chains. Many times supply chains can even dry up with inconsistent demand signals from the Pentagon. It affects their ability to maintain a workforce. And they indicate that many times the Pentagon acts like that they can just turn on and off production and then come back tomorrow and it would just be there. They need to be able to plan and project in the future. Now, at the Joint Systems Manufacturing Center, in the past, I have seen in trying to support the Lima tank plant in Ohio, over, for example, a 4 consecutive year period, the Army has in the past zeroed out funding for Army for Abrams tanks, only then to come back and request funding for 135 tanks 2 years later. Funding has fluctuated between 165 tanks and then gone to as few as 34 tanks. Now, this is a government-owned facility that is contractor-operated. It's as if the Pentagon looks at the Army tank plant as if they're going to an auto dealership to buy vehicles, when obviously they can't. They own the workforce, they own the supply chain, and if no one has responsibility for this at the Pentagon, then the supply chain dries up, the workforce moves on, and then we don't have an ability to focus on production. I appreciate that you're focusing on this, but when we look at the fiscal year 27 Army budget, the request has for the Joint Systems Center a total spending level of $309 million for infrastructure investment at the Joint Systems Manufacturing Center Lima plant, which is a 215% increase over FY26 levels. Excellent. But the budget also includes funding for the upgrades of 22 M1A2 Abrams for a total of a $654 million decrease over fiscal year 26 funding. The lower quantity of M1A2 upgrades and huge increase in investment at the plant is in part as a result of the development of the Army transitioning to the production of the new M1E3 main battle tank at Lima. I'm concerned that the gap in funding between decreasing M1A2 upgrades and ramping up of the M1E3 will leave a gap in work at the line, forcing either layoffs or relocations. Again, the supply chain and the workforce will be impacted so that when we go back for production for the M1E3, we're going to have this spigot turning on and off aspect that will impact production. So what are the Army's plans for transitioning from the M1A2 upgrades to the M1E3 production, and how do we get, which I know you're struggling with, how do we get to the point where the Pentagon can actually project and take into consideration its understanding of up and down its supply chain and up and down its workforce of actually a facility that the government owns, only one in North America?
Congressman, we've tried to work hand in glove with General Dynamics, who is the contractor at the Lima plant. This is one of the issues that the longer I've been in the seat, the more complex I realize it is. And it's complex because we don't operate like a private business. And I know all of you know that, but because we can't do things like at-scale multi-year procurement, because the average Secretary of the Army is only in the seat 23 months, because all of you have preferences on where the dollars go that don't necessarily match where we think they should, and that's okay, that's good government. That makes it where it is very difficult to provide long-term demand signals. And so if you think of why things like cost plus come to be, it is because we, the government, or we, the Army, when we tell industry what we want, by the time that thing is actually there, we may have changed our mind for all sorts of reasons. We, under continuing resolutions, which I think 18 in the last 20 years, we can't do new starts. So they just can't trust us.
Which have horrific impacts on you.
And so we end up doing all of these kind of backwards economic structures like cost plus pricing, which no one would prefer, but these are the
Let us
realities.
help you. As you come up with recommendations to address these issues, let us help you and give us recommendations to affect it, because we understand it affects capital, costs, and production.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks, Congressman.
Thanks much. Gentleman kneels back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on what my colleague Mike was talking about, and also my colleague Joe here. It comes down to, where are you going? What is the future of the Army? You have this Army Transformation Initiative. It appears as though it goes left on Monday and right on Tuesday. There's not a consistency. This committee must have from you, Mr. Secretary and General, a very clear understanding of what the Army Transformation Initiative is in all of its major elements. We just heard a discussion about Abrams tanks, and we heard a discussion earlier about the force in Poland or not in Poland. And so what we're seeing here is a significant inconsistency of direction. And we need to know, we're going to put together the NDAA in the days ahead. And that NDAA has to, I assume the Army is really interested in its transformation initiative. What exactly is it that you intend to do? What are the top 3 or 5 parts of that initiative? We're going to have to give you the authority, or maybe we disagree and don't want you to go in that direction. But what we're seeing here is enormous inconsistency in direction. And that is not going to suffice as we put together the future direction and laws that the Army is going to have to carry out. There's also a very serious problem in the mission capability rates of all of your equipment. It's trending negative. How are you going to address that? And is that part of the transformation initiative? I would hope that the ability to maintain your equipment is part of that. It's fundamental. And yet what we're seeing over time is a lack of attention by the Army on the ability to maintain its equipment. How are you going to address that? There's a pile of money coming your way, at least in the President's budget. Will that be used for the initiatives in the Army transformation? Will it be used for maintaining your equipment? How are you going to deal with that? And finally, what lessons have you learned from Ukraine? So let's go at this one at a time. Your Army Transformation Initiative, what are your 3 major actions, Mr. Secretary?
Congressman, action 1 is until data can be shared between every system seamlessly on the business side of the Army, we always describe the Army as 2 core functions. One is a killing machine on behalf of our nation that we hope we don't need. The other is a large enterprise-scale business. When we came in about a year and a half ago, we had 650 individual siloed business systems. We've cut it down to about 220. We're trying to get into the teens.
So that's an organizational issue.
That is a
reorganizing
purchasing
your
acquisition
bureaucracy.
silo-breaking issue, Congressman.
All right, that's 1. How about 2 and 3?
2 is all of our equipment, every single thing that my colleague, General LaNeve, mentioned. Every piece of equipment we buy has to be modular and open architecture, which practically means it should have things like USB ports, so that whatever technology in the future
Just heard a
exists,
discussion about we're not going to buy tanks, we are going to buy tanks. Does this initiative focus in on exactly what you're going to need in the future? General?
Sure, I think it does. When you take a look at our equipment, and the answer is yes and yes. We're not walking away from the ability to repair our equipment. That's the right to repair, the ability to be able to manufacture our own parts that we need to be able to do on legacy equipment. I really look at it in 3 bins: legacy equipment, enduring equipment, and then the modernized equipment. Legacy we have to divest. Enduring is what we're going to have: the Abrams, the Bradley, the Apache, the Blackhawk, until we can get to our new platforms that we have to do, sir, in order to have the best Army in the world against a pacing threat that they're going to ask us to counter.
In 23 seconds, I'm going to wrap this up. It is imperative that the Army be very, very explicit about what it needs and where it is going on your transformation initiative, which apparently is your principal direction. And secondly, dealing with the maintenance, we'll need to know what it is that you need.
Gentleman's time has expired. Votes have been called. We will go through this next set of questions, and then we will return here at 10:20. So, Secretary Driscoll, General LaNeve, thanks so much for joining us today. Before I get to my questions, I have an observation to make, and it's very close to home to me. One of my constituents, First Lieutenant Zachary Galley, was killed during a training evolution at JRTC in May of 2024. His death was absolutely preventable. The Army report said it was negligence and negligence only that led to his death. And that's why his parents, Gail and Michael, had to bury their 23-year-old son. Secretary Driscoll, I'd like you to take a serious look at what happened to Zachary and what happened across the spectrum. Because we spend billions of dollars each year to protect our brave men and women that go to combat, but we don't place the same emphasis on protecting them in training. A report of this committee in 2017 showed that 4 times the number of our military members die in training than they do in combat. And when those deaths are preventable and when there's negligence at issue, we need to act. We have a responsibility. We have parents that place their loved ones in our trust in serving in the United States military. The highest honor that they provide to this country is swearing their lives to this country. But they swear their lives knowing that the military is going to do everything they can to take care of them. And that's our obligation. And I would ask both of you, and I understand the Ferris document, and by the way, we need to address the Ferris doctrine as a Congress. But also there's a responsibility in our service branches to make sure that we do everything we can in a very dangerous environment, and we understand the dangers there, that we do everything we can to take care of our soldiers, our sailors, our Marines, our airmen, our guardians, and our Coast Guardsmen. That's the obligation this nation has because they raised their right hand, and they swore that obligation to this nation to put their lives on the line. But they also do it under the understanding that our military will provide an equal obligation in doing everything they can to protect them. That's our obligation as a nation. It's everyone's obligation. So again, I thank you for what you do. I want to go to a question that I have about the ATI. You know, the last time you were here, you know, we said, hey, you got some homework to do. Provide us some of the details on what's going on with the Transformation Initiative. We've gotten pretty short explanation of what's going on without the details necessary, especially in transitioning, things like TRADOC moving from Fort Eustis there, what's happening with T2Com. Are we going to be able to get some additional information? Because there's a lot of things going on here as the Army goes through this, and obviously a lot of changes have happened in the meantime. But it's important for us to understand that, especially, too, when we get questions not only from our constituents in those areas, but also from folks that are serving and going, what's going on? What's the transition initiative going to be? What it's going to look like? What are the tenets behind the decisions that are being made there? So I'd like to get your perspective on that.
Congressman, the first thing is I would say I would encourage you and any of your colleagues to go to an Army base near you or in your district, talk to the soldiers. My impression now, after having spent about a third of my days on the road, is, and I get a little bit of misinformation perhaps because of the difference in rank sometimes, but my impression is that the United States Army over the last 16 months has made a massive, hit an inflection point where it knows that it has to adopt to the new rules of the game that we are seeing in Ukraine and Israel, in the Middle East, all over the world now. Warfare is changing. And there's a mindset that what we have now is not sufficient, and we will take the assets that the American taxpayer has given us, and we will change. To your comment, Congressman, of whether we have been sufficient in explaining it. That is on me individually if we have not. And so I would be happy to come by your office anytime and meet with any of your colleagues to talk about it.
That'd be great. I think it's important to have those details. We want to make sure we understand it. We want to understand where the changes have been made, and then where the future direction is going. And those things are important too because they affect a lot of the efforts that go into planning, whether it's the fight up or whether it's the POM. All those things matter because of where we're going. And as you said, the transition is a big transition. So we want to make sure, how do we do our part to make sure that resources get to the right place. General LaNeve, you heard Mr. Turner talk a little bit about M1E3. Tell us a little bit more. You're looking at making major changes to that platform, and then looking at how do we change the whole mindset about how we modernize from a mindset of kind of hardware first and operation systems, software later. Give me your perspective on how you see software lining up with this modernization and how you're using modular open systems architecture to achieve that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. The Secretary talked about it, a little bit earlier, but it's a dramatic change when you go from a platform that gets incremental upgrades over time to one that you can literally continually upgrade based off of just being able to integrate new technology into the system by a simple USB port. I mean, it's a radical way of thinking. The second part, sir, is to have the IP rights in the very beginning, so our soldiers can actually produce our own parts and be able to repair at scale all of our equipment. The M1E3, sir, is a huge upgrade. It's lighter. It has less crew capabilities inside of it, so there's less manpower inside the tank itself. And we'll be able to get that into theater a heck of a lot faster because of the weight differences from the older model. We appreciate it, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. We will recess, and we will re-adjourn, or excuse me, we will return at 10:20. Thank you.
Good job, Chair Post. Thanks.